In today's video, we're going to talk about the sweet spots of doing a Roth conversion for someone who is 55 to 63 and those with a pension or $1 million or more. So this is going to be a very specific crowd we're doing a video of. Whenever hearing Roth conversion advice, you always want to be very careful. You don't want to think that a one-size-fits-all approach. For example, we specifically work with those who have pensions, $1 million plus saved, who have a lot of money in tax deferred, who have a large amount of guaranteed income for the rest of their life from their pension. We call it the 2% Club that I'm actually writing a book about, and it should be out here soon. But with this crowd, they're going to be in a higher income situation. Roth conversions are going to make more sense for them. Someone who has $500,000 and no pension may not necessarily need to do any Roth conversions because they're going to end up eating up the standard deduction at a tax-free amount. They may not even have to pay any taxes. So why would we pay taxes when maybe they're working, between 55 and 63 at a higher rate than what they could pay it in retirement? And you've always heard you'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. And that may be true for my friend with $500,000 and no pension. But for all my friends in the 2% Club who watch this channel, who have been avid viewers, who subscribe to this channel and like all of our videos and leave us comments about all the fun stuff that we talk about on these videos. If you thought that was funny, make sure you leave me a comment and tell me I've got a good sense of humor. Some people don't always believe I do. So it'd make my day if you can tell me I do. And so our marketing director and some of our teammates, they always get on me for all my jokes, and some people don't laugh at me. And I'd appreciate that. And so that's what we're going to talk about on today's video is, what should we be looking at with doing these Roth conversions? And I'll give you a hint. Most of the times we're looking at the 12% and the 24% bracket to see if this makes sense. So let's get into it.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
So if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know who we talk to, as I just mentioned, and maybe you're looking for this type of planning. Maybe you're thinking, hey, I've got an advisor, or I'm doing it on my own and I want specific help. Reach out to us. We work with a lot of clients from this channel. They meet this specific niche of people we serve. And so if you go to the link below, you can click on that to fill out a questionnaire. We've got all the frequently asked questions to learn more about us, to ensure it could be a good fit. And then also, if you just go to our website, you'll find more information on us too as well. So feel free to do that. We always love to connect with those watching our videos and be able to help them moving forward, because this is what we do here. But to get back to the educational content here today, let's talk about the sweet spot for Roth conversions. Now, if you have that pension, $1 million plus, Roth conversions, that this is something that's very popular for people in your crowd. I would tell you that the majority of our clients are doing Roth conversions. So we specifically serve those 1 to 10 million with pensions, higher income, higher net worth. And so in that case, this is something you're going to want to look really closely at. When we look at the Roth conversions for this, there's a lot of things we have to pay attention to. First, we have to realize, what is your income now? What's it going to be expected to be in the future as well? And so you have to look at, what's your pension amount? Are you going to get Social Security? And if so, how much? And how much in tax deferred dollars do you have? And so all three of that is going to tell us what to look at. So for example, maybe you are still working right now. Maybe you're making $100,000 a year, but maybe when you retire, your pension is going to be $50,000. Your Social Security is going to be $50,000, and you're going to have $3 million in tax deferred investments, so that when you eventually get to 73, you're going to have to take out 4% of that. And let's say it didn't grow at all. You're going to have to take out $120,000, plus you have $100,000 of guaranteed income already. You're going to be at a higher income in retirement than you are when you're working. And so in those cases, and we see this often with the crowd we serve, it could make sense to do Roth conversions. Now, again, remember, your peers may not be in a higher income tax bracket in retirement. And so at that point, we have to decide, well, how much should we convert? Because we probably don't want to convert everything, because then we're going to be in the highest tax brackets and we're going to force ourselves to pay taxes that we probably just don't want to pay. So that's something to consider there as well. But we also have to worry about in the future things like Medicare premiums or Social Security becoming taxable, which we're going to break down in the video here today. So let's just say right now, you're 60 years old, you're making $100,000. What should you do? Well, it's important to know that, the 12% bracket goes up to about $200,000 right now if you're married filing jointly. And so if that's the case, You also have the standard deduction on top of that of $31,500 for the rest of the 2025 due to the increase in the one big beautiful bill. You could convert $30,000 as an example and be in the 12% tax bracket. That's a pretty good place to be. I would tell you, if you're thinking about doing a Roth conversion, that's definitely a place you should definitely start, and definitely look at doing that if that's your situation. Again, not guaranteed advice, but something to really consider is something I would tell here. And we always want to make it very clear on this channel. We can't give specific advice. I don't know your situation. There's a lot of factors to consider. That's why it's important to work with a team as you plan moving forward. And whether that's us or someone else, make sure you're getting that help, because you are in an advanced situation. You are going to need more advanced planning. And I can tell you, if you're working with a team that does a comprehensive approach, has a CPA, has the estate planning attorneys, have the, all the help you need as you're planning your retirement, you're going to be able to see a lot of value. And especially with these types of conversations of how much to Roth convert, if you can do this successfully, you can increase your net worth. You can save hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, and if you just implement it successfully. So hopefully that could be some encouragement for you of the importance of planning for this, but also just not guessing, running your numbers, running the reports, calculations of what's going to be the right amount for you. And so that 12% could still be something, better than nothing is what we always say. But you have to ask yourself, is that going to do some heavy lifting? If you're only doing a Roth conversion of $30,000, well, in 1 year, if you have $2 million, all you need is a 1.5% return to be back right up to $2 million. And that's probably not going to lower that requirement of distribution too much if your account continues to grow by the time you reach age 75. And so, a lot of times we're just not seeing 12% be enough. It better nothing, but it's maybe not enough. So, depending on how much you have, that may be a consideration. But maybe you are working right now, you have 100,000, but maybe when you retire, your pension's only 20,000, and maybe your, Social Security is not as much either. Well, and maybe you only have $1 million. Well, in that case, maybe the 12% could be enough over time to be able to do that. And because when you look at your numbers down the road, maybe you are not going to find yourself in the highest or higher tax brackets. And so it's important to run your numbers, again, not only now, but where you're going to be expected to be is what we look at there. And so we really look at, with a lot of our clients, the 24% tax bracket there. Now, the consideration here, let's say that you're retired at this 55 to 63 point. Well, it's important for you to know that if you haven't taken Social Security, right, because you can't take it until 62, then you're not going to have to worry about any increased income. You're going to have more room to do Roth conversions earlier on in your retirement. And so that's something to consider. You will have your pension most likely, unless your pension is going to be deferred down the line. And so we have to look at what is that amount going to be and what's the gap there as well. But let's say your pension's only 50,000, you're not taking Social Security. If 130,000 is the amount we can convert to maximize 12% plus standard deduction, you can do a pretty hefty Roth conversion of about $80,000. If you're retired at 55 and you can do that for the next 8 years, or until you take Social Security, could even be longer than that, because if you wait till 70 to take Social Security, you may be able to get a lot of your Roth conversions done. So again, it's just going to depend on all of your situations. So if you're still working, that may mean something else. If you retire early, if you have a larger pension or a smaller pension, all plays a part here. So hopefully that gives you good perspective as you think through this conversation. And that could also be a reason why you retire earlier, to take advantage of those other brackets, right? We don't just say only retire early for the tax benefits. Definitely see the value of retiring earlier and making sure you've got a purpose of doing so, of what that's going to be. Maybe you want to retire from your work because it's stressful, or it's hard on your body, or whatever the case may be. But just understand that you want to put those early years of retirement to work. We don't want to go without doing a Roth conversion if all we're having is our pension as income, because we could be potentially leaving money on the table at low tax brackets that we may not see in the future when those required minimum distributions start, or when our Social Security starts, as we've been talking about. So let's change the script now and see why that 24% bracket could make more sense. Now, the reason why we're jumping all the way from the 12% to the 24% is understanding how the brackets work. The 12% to the 22% is almost 100% jump there in an increased tax rate. And so it may not make sense to just, go from doing $10,000 above the 12% and paying 22% taxes on it. If you're going to go, you might as well go big, is ultimately the thought process. And so the 24% bracket is very large right now. If you're a married filing jointly couple, you can deduct about $425,000 or sorry, not deduct, but you could take out, let's say you have no income, no pension, no Social Security. Your income could be $425,000 that you could Roth convert as an example and still be in the 24% bracket. That's a great place to be. That's a large bracket. That's a lot of room for us to do some heavy lifting for most of the clients we work with who are 55 to 63. The other thing to consider, if you're single, that number is about $215,000 that you can take out of your, as a Roth conversion if you had no other income while still staying in the 24% bracket. So the reason why we look at the 24% bracket is a lot of people consider that to be a historically low, a relatively low, a very fair tax rate for the clients we work with pensions and $1 million plus saved. If you go back in history, tax brackets have been much higher than that in the past. And a lot of people expect they're going to be higher moving forward as well, as we've talked about. So with that being the case, do we want to lock in a 24% rate now? Could make sense. Now, here's something we always advise our clients of. It's called tax diversification. It's not putting all your eggs in one basket. So we typically don't recommend our clients to move everything to Roth. We typically want to have more of a balance. Now, that balance is going to depend. So we do the exact calculations to see what that is amount that we want to do for every client we work with. But it's going to depend on your situation, but there is an amount that you want to look at. You don't want everything in tax deferred because then you're forced to take higher amounts out in the future. You don't have any flexibility. There's not necessarily any control there. You have to be worried about the widow's penalty if one of the spouses pass away. Now you go from married filing jointly to single. That's a big concern. That's why Roth conversion can be valuable for the families we work with. Or if you want to leave a legacy, well, now they're going to have to pay taxes if it's not in the Roth. So that's also why the Roth conversion makes sense. And so that's something we have to be aware of. And the reason why we typically don't recommend going above the 32% bracket or into the 32% bracket is most people are just not going to be there if we're seeing what we're seeing today. Now, there is concerns that the taxes could rise, as we talked about. But, for them to rise 32% or more, there's going to be a lot that has to happen for that to be the case. And so if you look at most of our clients, let's say they have a pension, and we're going to talk about future now. Let's talk about if they're 75 when they have the required minimum distribution. Let's say their pension's $100,000. Let's say their Social Security is $100,000. It's going to be taxable as income. That's a pretty high amount. And let's say that they have a RMD of, their RMD is $5 million by the time they're 75, which could be realistic for if you have $2 million right now at age 60. And so if you have $5 million, then at that point, your RMD is going to be about $200,000, about 4% of that. So $200,000 plus $200,000 guaranteed income, you're still going to be $400,000. That's still going to be under the married filing jointly amount. But plus, it could be indexed for inflation, so you're probably going to be even lesser than a 24% bracket at that time. So you understand how this works, and you still probably are going to be in the 24% because you're at the high end, and even with index, you'd still likely not be in the lower end that far, but you get the idea. So that's why we don't recommend typically going to 32%. Now, we do that with some of our clients, but if you're finding yourself with, $5 million or more in tax deferred, like some of our clients, then that could make sense to go into the 32. But now with the new SALT deduction being phased out at the 32 during the 32% bracket, you just definitely need to be aware of that. And when we run calculations for clients, sometimes it may not make sense to lose that deduction if they're able to take advantage of that. So you can see why that 24% bracket makes sense. But remember, if you're under age 63, what does that mean? You don't have to worry about Medicare premiums yet. And so that's why it can also make sense to go up to the 24% because you're not going to see any added cost on top of that for Medicare. Whereas if you were to do this when you're 63 or older, when you turn 65, so when you're 63, at 65 is when they calculate your Medicare premium, they go off your 63 income. And so at that point, you could be paying, if you went all the way up to the 24% bracket at age 63, you could be paying an extra $5,000 or more on top of the base Medicare premium. That's per spouse, which means you could pay $10,000 extra because you did this. You could save $10,000 if you convert before age 63, and you could go and take advantage of those 24% relatively low tax brackets currently. So something that we really, really suggest for our clients early is to get ahead of that. So then when they do get to Medicare age, when they do get to RMD age, they've got a lot of their money already in Roth. They're not going to force their income higher, and they're not going to have to pay more in Medicare premiums at that time, or they're not going to pay as much in Medicare premiums at that time. So that's a big thought process when we look to do Roth conversions under age 63. So if you're 55 to 63, all the advantages we've already talked about, but that one is a big one as well. And then of also doing these Roth conversions now could allow our Social Security to potentially be less taxable in the future as well, because the higher your income is, the more tax you're going to have to pay on your Social Security. So all of that playing together could be advantages of why that 24% bracket could be productive for you. And again, maybe you do the 24% bracket for 1, 2, 3 years. Maybe it's just over a short amount of time and you're able to get a lot of heavy lifting done. And so you're not going to have to do as much heavy lifting down the road. So you just have to run your numbers and see what makes sense for you. So if this is you and you found this video helpful, and maybe you're that 55 to 63 pension million plus, that's exactly who we serve. That is the majority of our clients are right in that range, and most of them are retiring early or looking at retiring early, and that's who we serve best. And so if you are looking for this type of planning, like I mentioned earlier, feel free to schedule time with us. Go to our website, peakretirementplanning.com, or go on the link in the description below and schedule time to talk with our team and see if we could be a good fit to serve you. We see people just like you every day, and we love to connect with those who watch our videos and to see if we could be a good fit to serve you and help you even more. So with that being said, that's all I have on today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement, and we'll catch you on the next one.